"Can I share this table?" asked the paralyzed girl to a Hell's Angel. Then, he said, the morning sun filtered through the windows of Pete's diner, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Emily Dawson's hands gripped the wheels of her chair tightly as she maneuvered through the entrance, the familiar bell above the door announcing her arrival. The sweet aroma of coffee and maple syrup filled the air, but it did little to calm her nerves. Her heart sank as she took in the crowded space. Every table seemed occupied with the usual morning crowd. Truckers hunched over steaming mugs, elderly couples sharing newspapers, and families with children enjoying their weekend breakfast. The buzz of conversation surrounded her, yet she felt oddly disconnected from it all. Emily noticed how conversations quieted as she passed, the way eyes darted toward her wheelchair before quickly looking away. She'd grown accustomed to these reactions over the past 2 years, but they still stung. A waitress bustled past, barely acknowledging her presence, focused on delivering plates to other customers. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. The diner's narrow aisles posed their own challenge. Emily carefully navigated between chairs and tables, apologizing softly when people had to shift to make room for her chair. Each movement felt like a reminder of how different her life had become since the accident. "Watch out!" someone called as a child darted in front of her chair. Emily pulled back quickly, her wheels catching on an uneven tile. The sudden stop made her stomach lurch, and she felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment as several heads turned her way. She'd chosen this morning to venture out, hoping to recapture some normalcy in her life. The diner had been one of her favorite spots before the accident, a place where she'd spent countless Sunday mornings with friends, laughing over coffee and planning adventures. Now those same friends were nowhere to be seen, having gradually drifted away after her injury. Her eyes swept the room again, searching for any available space. That's when she noticed him, a large man sitting in a corner booth, his leather vest marked with patches that identified him as a Hell's Angel. His appearance was intimidating. Full beard, tattoos visible on his arms, and a stern expression as he cut up pancakes for a small girl beside him. Emily hesitated. The booth was the only one with extra space, and something about the gentle way the man attended to his daughter made her pause. Despite his rough exterior, there was a tenderness in his actions that gave her hope. Taking a deep breath, Emily wheeled herself toward their table. The man looked up as she approached, his dark eyes meeting hers. The little girl beside him stopped mid-bite, watching curiously as Emily came to a stop beside their booth. "Can I share this table?" Emily asked, her voice smaller than she intended. She braced herself for rejection, ready to hear the usual excuses people made to avoid interaction. The man studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he gave a simple nod, shifting slightly to make more room. Emily felt a surprising wave of relief wash over her as she positioned her wheelchair at the table. Despite the man's intimidating appearance, there was something reassuring about his quiet acceptance, something that made her feel, for the first time that morning, like she belonged. The clinking of silverware against plates filled the silence between them. Emily fidgeted with her napkin, aware of how different she must look from Jonah's usual breakfast companions. The little girl beside him kept stealing glances at Emily's wheelchair, her pancakes forgotten on her plate. "I like your chair," Maddie finally said, her eyes bright with curiosity. "It's like a race car. Does it go really fast?" Emily's tension melted at the child's innocent observation. "Sometimes," she replied with a gentle smile, "especially going downhill." "Dad, can I have a chair like that?" Maddie tugged at her father's sleeve, making Emily hold her breath, unsure how he would respond to such a sensitive question. To her surprise, Jonah's stern features softened as he looked at his daughter. "Sweetheart, that chair is special for Miss Emily because she needs it to get around." His voice was unexpectedly gentle, nothing like what his tough exterior suggested. "Just like you need your bicycle to ride to the park?" "Oh," Maddie nodded, understanding in her young way. "I'm Maddie, and I'm 6. She held up 6 fingers proudly. "This is my dad. He looks scary, but he's not. He makes the best pancake faces." Jonah's cheeks reddened slightly. "Maddie," he said in a warning tone, but there was no real stern S in it. "It's true," Maddie insisted. "Show her, Dad. Make one for Miss Emily." Emily watched as Jonah's weathered hands carefully arranged whipped cream and berries into a smiling face on a fresh stack of pancakes. The contrast between his intimidating appearance and this tender act struck her deeply. "That's really sweet," Emily said softly as he pushed the plate toward her. "Thank you." "It's nothing," Jonah replied, but his eyes were kind. "Maddie insists on pancake faces every weekend. It's our tradition." As they ate, the conversation began to flow more naturally. Jonah spoke about Maddie's upcoming school play, his pride evident in every word. Emily found herself drawn into their world, charmed by Maddie's stories and surprised by Jonah's attentive parenting. "I served in Iraq," Jonah mentioned quietly during a lull in the conversation, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "2 tours. That's where I learned that life's too short to waste time being anything but real with people." Emily's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The admission caught her off guard, not just the words, but the weight behind them. She saw him differently now, understanding the depth beneath his rough exterior. "After that, the gang life seemed different," he continued, glancing at Maddie, who was absorbed in drawing on her paper placemat. "Couldn't reconcile it anymore, especially after becoming a single dad." Emily nodded, recognizing the familiar shadow of loss in his eyes. She understood now why he'd so readily welcomed her to his table. He knew what it was like to feel different, to carry visible and invisible scars. When the plates were cleared and it was time to leave, Emily felt a peculiar reluctance to end their encounter. They hadn't exchanged numbers or made plans to meet again, but something unspoken passed between them as Jonah helped Maddie with her coat. A shared understanding, a recognition of another soul who knew what it meant to rebuild a life from broken pieces. Emily wheeled herself into the diner the next morning, the bell above the door chiming softly. The familiar smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around her like a warm blanket. She'd chosen to come back, hoping to recapture some of yesterday's unexpected warmth. The same waitress from yesterday, Betty, greeted her with a friendly wave. "Same booth as yesterday, honey?" Betty asked, already reaching for a menu. Emily shook her head. "No, I'll just take a spot at the counter today." She didn't want to seem like she was looking for Jonah and Maddie, even though her eyes had automatically scanned the room for them when she entered. The morning crowd was thinner than yesterday, mostly older folks reading newspapers and truckers grabbing quick meals. Emily settled at the counter, ordering a coffee and chocolate chip pancakes. As she waited, she found herself thinking about Jonah's pancake faces and Maddie's innocent questions. The bell chimed again. Emily didn't turn around at first, but something in the way the diner's atmosphere shifted made her spine stiffen. The conversations around her dimmed, and she could feel eyes darting between her and whoever had just walked in. "Emily?" A familiar voice made her stomach drop. "Is that really you?" She turned slowly, her hands gripping her wheels tightly. Derek stood there, looking exactly as she remembered him. Tall, handsome, and wearing that expensive watch she'd given him for their last Christmas together. His face, usually so charming, twisted into something between pity and disgust. "Hello, Derek," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, shaking his head. "I heard about the accident, but—" His eyes traveled from her face down to her wheelchair, making her feel exposed and vulnerable. "God, Emily, you've really ruined your life, haven't you? I mean, look at you." The words hit her like physical blows. Emily felt her cheeks burn as other customers pretended not to listen. Her coffee cup trembled in her hands as she set it down. "I can't deal with this," Derek continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "This isn't the Emily I knew. The Emily I knew was whole." Tears pricked at Emily's eyes. She wanted to say something, anything, to defend herself, but shame and hurt closed her throat. The wheelchair suddenly felt like a cage, trapping her with Derek's cruel words. "Is there a problem here?" A deep voice cut through Emily's humiliation. Jonah stood nearby, his presence solid and reassuring. She hadn't even noticed him come in. Derek looked Jonah up and down, taking in the tattoos and leather vest. His lip curled slightly. "This is a private conversation." "Not anymore, it's not," Jonah replied, his voice quiet but firm. He moved to stand beside Emily's wheelchair, not touching her but close enough that she could feel the protective energy radiating from him. Derek took a step back, his confidence wavering. "Whatever. I've said what I needed to say." He turned and left, the bell jingling harshly in his wake. Emily sat frozen, her pancakes forgotten, feeling smaller than she had in months. The diner's usual chatter slowly resumed around her, but she barely heard it through the rushing in her ears. Jonah pulled up a stool next to her. "Hey," he said softly, waiting until she looked at him. "You're stronger than him. Don't let anyone make you feel less than what you are." She met his gaze, seeing nothing but sincere concern in his eyes. The words were simple, but they acted like a lifeline, something to hold on to in the storm of emotions Derek had left behind. Emily nodded, grateful but still shaken, as a tear slipped down her cheek. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the diner's parking lot as Jonah held the door open for Emily. Her wheels rolled smoothly over the threshold, but her shoulders remained tense, Derek's cruel words still echoing in her mind. "Let me walk you to your car," Jonah offered, his voice gentler than his imposing appearance would suggest. Emily nodded, grateful for the company. The thought of being alone right now made her chest tight. They moved slowly through the parking lot, Emily leading the way to her specially equipped sedan. The silence between them felt different from their first meeting, more comfortable, though tinged with shared understanding of pain. "You know," Jonah began, running a hand through his beard, "seeing that guy in there, it reminded me of how people looked at me after Sarah died." He paused, his eyes fixed on some distant point. "That's my wife. Was my wife." Emily stopped her chair, turning to face him. The afternoon light softened his rough features, making him look younger, more vulnerable. "2 years ago," he continued, "she went to the store one evening. Never came back. Drunk driver." His words came out clipped, each one carrying the weight of untold grief. "Suddenly, I was that guy. You know, the one people whisper about at school pickup. Poor Jonah, raising Maddie all alone." Emily's hands tightened on her wheels. "I'm so sorry," she said softly, understanding all too well how it felt to be the subject of others' pity. "The thing is," Jonah said, leaning against a nearby car, "people think they know what you're going through. They think they know what you need, but they don't know anything." He looked directly at Emily. "Just like that guy in there. He thinks he knows what your life is like now, but he doesn't have a clue." Emily felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the ones Derek had caused. These came from recognition, from being truly seen. "How do you do it?" she asked. "Raise Maddie on your own?" A small smile touched Jonah's lips. "One day at a time. Some days are harder than others. But Maddie, she makes it worth it. She reminds me there's still good in the world." They reached Emily's car, and she pulled out her keys. Before she could unlock it, Jonah cleared his throat. "Listen," he said, shifting his weight slightly. "Maybe we could exchange numbers, in case you want to talk sometime, or if Maddie and I are heading to the diner again." He left the invitation open-ended, no pressure behind it. Emily found herself nodding before she could overthink it. They exchanged phones, each typing in their numbers. When Jonah handed her phone back, his rough fingers brushed against hers for a moment. "Thank you," Emily said quietly, looking up at him. "For what you did in there, and for understanding." Jonah simply nodded, stepping back to give her space to transfer into her car. For the first time since Derek had walked into the diner, Emily felt something other than shame and hurt. It was small, barely there, but unmistakable. A glimmer of hope. She started her car, watching in the rearview mirror as Jonah stood in the parking lot until she turned onto the main street. His presence, even from a distance, felt like a shield against the day's earlier pain. Emily sat in her apartment, staring at her phone. The message from Jonah glowed on the screen. "Maddie and I are heading to Memorial Park on Saturday for a picnic. Would you like to join us?" Her thumb hovered over the keypad. The last few days had been a blur of emotion since the incident with Derek at the diner. She'd spent most of her time at home, processing everything that had happened. Jonah's kindness that day had touched something deep inside her, but the thought of spending more time with him and his daughter made her stomach flutter with anxiety. She wheeled herself to the window, watching leaves dance in the afternoon breeze. The park he mentioned was only a few blocks away. She knew it well, or at least she used to. She hadn't been there since the accident. The paths were paved, though, making it accessible for her chair. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Jonah. "Maddie's been asking about you. She wants to show you her new kite." Emily smiled, despite herself. During their brief encounter at the diner, Maddie's innocent charm had brightened her day. The little girl hadn't stared at her wheelchair or treated her differently. She'd just seen Emily as another person to share her stories with. Still, doubt crept in. What if she just ended up being a burden? What if the terrain was harder to navigate than she remembered? What if other people stared? She closed her eyes, remembering Jonah's words from the parking lot. "People think they know what you're going through. They think they know what you need, but they don't know anything." Taking a deep breath, Emily picked up her phone and typed, "What time?" The response came quickly. 11:20 am. We'll bring sandwiches and lemonade." Before she could change her mind, Emily replied, "I'll be there." Saturday morning arrived with perfect picnic weather. Sunny but not too hot, with just enough breeze to rustle the trees. Emily arrived at the park entrance at 10:55, her heart pounding. She'd chosen a comfortable outfit, a flowing summer dress that was easy to manage in her chair, and a light cardigan in case the breeze picked up. She spotted them near the central fountain. Jonah was spreading out a red and white checkered blanket, while Maddie bounced around him, clutching something fuzzy and brown. When Maddie saw Emily approaching, her face lit up. "Emily!" she called out, running over. "Look what I brought!" She thrust forward a well-loved teddy bear. "This is Mr. Snuggles. He's my best friend." "Well, hello there, Mr. Snuggles," Emily said, carefully taking the offered bear. "It's very nice to meet you." "He helps me when I'm scared or sad," Maddie explained matter-of-factly. I thought maybe he could help you too if you want. Emily felt her throat tighten at the simple kindness in Maddie's words. She looked up to find Jonah watching them, a soft expression on his usually stern face. When their eyes met, he gave her a small nod of understanding. "Thank you, Maddie," Emily managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She hugged the teddy bear gently before handing it back. "That's very sweet of you." For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt a genuine smile spread across her face. It wasn't forced or polite. It came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere she thought might have been lost forever. While Maddie played with her kite nearby, Emily and Jonah sat on the checkered blanket, watching the little girl's carefree movements. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and a gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of nearby flowering trees. "She's amazing," Emily said, nodding toward Maddie. "So full of life." Jonah smiled, his usual tough exterior softening. "Yeah, she is. Keeps me going most days." Emily fidgeted with the hem of her cardigan, gathering her courage. "Can I tell you something? About how—" She gestured to her wheelchair. "About how this happened?" Jonah turned to face her, his full attention evident in his steady gaze. "Of course." "It was just a regular Tuesday," Emily began, her voice quiet but steady. "I was driving home from work, thinking about wedding plans of all things." She paused, twisting a blade of grass between her fingers. "The other driver was texting. Didn't even see the red light. When I woke up in the hospital, everything had changed." Emily's eyes grew distant as she continued. "The doctors told me I'd never walk again. Derek, my ex-fiancé, he stuck around for about 2 months before he couldn't handle it anymore. Said he wasn't strong enough for this." She gave a bitter laugh. "As if he was the one who needed to be strong." "Sounds like he did you a favor by leaving," Jonah said, his voice gruff with barely contained anger. "Maybe. But it's not just him. It's everything. The way people look at me, or worse, look through me, like I'm somehow less than I was before." Emily's voice cracked slightly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm invisible, like the chair is all anyone sees." Jonah was quiet for a moment, watching Maddie chase her kite across the grass. "I get it. Not the same way, but I understand feeling invisible." He took a deep breath. "When I came back from Iraq, I couldn't relate to anyone. Everything felt wrong. Then Sarah, my wife, she got sick so suddenly. Cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I'm so sorry," Emily said softly. "The guilt eats at you," Jonah continued. "I survived a war zone, but I couldn't save her, couldn't protect her. Some days I look at Maddie and wonder if I'm enough for her." Emily reached out, hesitating for a moment before placing her hand on his arm. "From what I've seen, you're more than enough." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Maddie play. The afternoon light turned golden, casting everything in a warm glow. "You know what the hardest part is?" Emily said finally. "Learning to rebuild yourself when all the pieces feel scattered. Finding out who you are when everything you thought defined you is gone." Jonah nodded slowly. "Yeah. After Sarah died, I had to figure out who I was without her, who I needed to be for Maddie. Still working on it, honestly." "Does it get easier?" Emily asked. "Not easier," Jonah replied thoughtfully. "Just different. You learn to carry it differently." As the sun began to set, they packed up the remains of their picnic. Their conversation had flowed naturally for hours, touching on hopes, fears, and the daily struggles they both faced. Something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding that went beyond surface-level sympathy. When Jonah helped Emily fold the blanket, their eyes met, and in that moment they both recognized what had happened. They'd found someone who truly saw them, someone who understood the weight they carried without trying to fix or change it. Emily stared at her phone, reading Jonah's message for the third time. Her thumb hovered over the screen as she considered his invitation to the Veterans Charity event. "You'll find something there that might change how you see yourself," he had written. Such a simple message, yet it made her heart flutter with both anxiety and hope. She wheeled herself to the window of her apartment, watching the morning traffic pass by. 2 years of isolation had become her comfort zone, but lately, thanks to Jonah and Maddie, she'd been venturing out more. Still, a large event filled with strangers made her stomach churn. After several minutes of internal debate, she typed back, "What time should I be there?" The day of the event arrived with perfect weather. Sunny but cool, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of late spring flowers. Emily spotted Jonah's truck in the parking lot of the community center, and her nervousness eased slightly at the sight of his familiar vehicle. As she approached the entrance, Jonah appeared, holding the door open. He wore a clean black t-shirt instead of his usual leather jacket, but his arms still displayed the tattoos that told stories of his past. "Glad you made it," he said, his voice warm and encouraging. Inside, the community center buzzed with activity. Veterans of all ages moved about the space, some in wheelchairs like Emily, others with prosthetic limbs or other visible injuries. What struck her most wasn't their disabilities. It was their energy, their laughter, their evident strength. A woman about Emily's age rolled up to them, her wheelchair decorated with colorful stickers. "You must be Emily," she said with a bright smile. "I'm Maria. Jonah mentioned you might be coming today." Emily shot Jonah a questioning look, but he just shrugged with a slight smile. "Come on," Maria said. "Let me introduce you to some people who changed my whole perspective on life after my injury." For the next few hours, Emily found herself drawn into conversations that touched her heart deeply. She met James, a former Marine who lost both legs in Afghanistan, but now competed in wheelchair basketball tournaments. Sarah, who became paralyzed in a military training accident, showed Emily photos of her recent skydiving adventure. "I never thought I'd feel alive again," Sarah told her, "but look at me now. The chair doesn't define who I am. It's just part of my story." Throughout the afternoon, Emily felt something shifting inside her. These people didn't view their disabilities as endings, but as new beginnings. They spoke of adaptability, of finding different ways to achieve their goals, of refusing to let circumstances dictate their worth. During a break in the activities, Emily found herself near a wall covered with photographs. They showed veterans participating in sports, graduating from college, getting married, living full lives despite their injuries. She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of sadness. Jonah appeared beside her, saying nothing but offering silent support as she absorbed the images before her. "I get it now," Emily said softly. "Why you wanted me to come here." She looked around the room at all these people who had refused to let their injuries define them. For the first time since her accident, she felt truly seen and understood. These weren't people who pitied her or tried to fix her. They were people who showed her what was possible. From across the room, she caught Jonah watching her with quiet pride in his eyes. He'd known exactly what she needed. Not someone to save her, but to show her she wasn't alone. The morning sun streamed through Emily's apartment windows as she adjusted her workout mat on the floor. 2 weeks had passed since the Veterans Charity event, and something had shifted inside her. The physical therapist she'd been avoiding for months had noticed the change during their session yesterday. "Your upper body strength is improving," he'd said, genuine pride in his voice. Emily smiled at the memory as she began her morning stretches. The exercises were challenging, but she approached them with newfound determination. The stories from the veterans echoed in her mind, especially Maria's words about making every day count. Later that afternoon, Emily wheeled herself to her favorite coffee shop. The barista, Jenny, noticed the difference in her demeanor right away. "You're glowing today," Jenny said, preparing Emily's usual order. "Something good happening?" Emily adjusted her position, sitting straighter in her chair. "I'm just feeling more like myself lately." After getting her coffee, she positioned herself at a small table by the window. She pulled out her journal, something her therapist had suggested she start keeping again. The pages were filling up with goals, both small and large. Some she'd already accomplished: attending therapy sessions regularly, establishing a morning routine, reaching out to old friends. The bell above the door chimed, and a mother struggled to maneuver a stroller inside. Without hesitation, Emily wheeled over to hold the door. The woman's grateful smile warmed her heart. 2 months ago, she would have stayed in her corner, feeling too self-conscious to interact. Back at home, Emily sorted through her closet, pulling out clothes she hadn't worn since the accident. She'd been hiding in baggy sweaters and loose pants, but now she found herself wanting to dress like she used to. She pulled out a pretty blouse she'd loved before, surprised to find it still fit perfectly. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maria, inviting her to join the wheelchair basketball practice next week. Emily's heart raced with nervous excitement as she typed, "Yes." As evening approached, Emily couldn't stop thinking about how much had changed since that day at the veterans event. She picked up her phone and dialed Jonah's number before she could talk herself out of it. He answered on the third ring, his deep voice familiar and comforting. "Emily?" "Hi," she said, suddenly feeling shy. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all. Maddie just went to bed. Everything okay?" Emily took a deep breath. "Actually, yes, everything's really good. I wanted to thank you for encouraging me to go to that event. It changed something in me." There was a pause on the other end, and she could almost see his gentle smile. "I can hear it in your voice," he said softly. "I've been doing things I was afraid to do before," she continued. "Yesterday I even signed up for a painting class I've been wanting to try." "That's great, Emily." His voice carried genuine warmth. "You sound like yourself. I mean, the person I've gotten to know these past few weeks, only stronger." Emily felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I don't think I would have gotten here without your friendship, Jonah. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself." "You had it in you all along," he replied. "Sometimes we just need someone to remind us of who we are." Emily smiled, touched by the simple truth in his words. Their conversation continued naturally, discussing their days and sharing small moments. With each word, Emily felt their connection deepening, their friendship growing into something precious and real. Jonah sat in the sterile examination room, his large frame making the plastic chair seem impossibly small. Maddie perched on the paper-covered exam table, her legs swinging back and forth, creating a rhythmic crinkling sound. She seemed so small, so vulnerable in her pink t-shirt with unicorns on it. Dr. Peterson entered the room, her usual warm smile replaced by a serious expression. She held a manila folder thick with test results. Jonah's stomach tightened. "Mr. Kincaid," she began, pulling up her rolling stool. "I've reviewed Maddie's blood work and other tests. I'm afraid the results aren't what we hoped for." Jonah reached for Maddie's hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around her tiny ones. The doctor's words seemed to blur together as she explained about autoimmune disorders, specialized treatments, and medical terms he couldn't quite grasp. But two things stood out crystal clear. His baby girl was sick, and the treatment would cost more money than he had. Daddy? Maddie's voice pulled him back to the present. Can we get ice cream like you promised? He forced a smile. Sure, Princess. Just let me finish talking with Dr. Peterson. After arranging for Maddie to color in the waiting room, under the receptionist's watchful eye, Jonah returned to hear the details. The numbers made his head spin. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket expenses would be substantial. That evening, after tucking Maddie into bed, Jonah sat at his kitchen table surrounded by bills and insurance paperwork. His phone buzzed, a text from Emily asking if he'd like to meet for coffee tomorrow. His thumb hovered over the screen, remembering how her smile had become a bright spot in his days. But then his eyes drifted to the medical bills spread across the table. He couldn't think about coffee dates or friendship, or the way Emily made him feel when his daughter needed him. He set the phone aside without responding. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls to insurance companies, research about treatment options, and trying to maintain normalcy for Maddie. Each time Emily's name appeared on his phone, he felt a pang of guilt. She'd left voicemails, each one more concerned than the last. Jonah, I haven't heard from you in days. Is everything okay? Hey, it's me again. I'm getting worried. Jonah, please just let me know you're all right. He listened to each one, his heart heavy. Emily had become important to him, more important than he'd realized. But he couldn't divide his attention now. Maddie needed him focused, needed him whole. One afternoon, while Maddie napped, he saw Emily's number flash across his screen again. His finger moved to decline the call, but he hesitated. Through the window, he could see the tire swing he'd hung for Maddie swaying gently in the breeze. The sight of it twisted something inside him, a reminder of simpler times, of promises to keep his little girl safe and happy. He declined the call. Later that night, he received a text from Emily. I thought we were friends. Whatever's wrong, you can talk to me about it. Jonah stared at the message until his vision blurred. He wanted to explain, to tell her about Maddie, about his fears and the crushing weight of responsibility. But explaining meant letting her in, and letting her in meant having one more person to worry about, one more relationship to maintain when he barely had the energy to keep himself together. He placed his phone face down on the table and walked away, leaving Emily's message unanswered. Emily stared at her phone, scrolling through her past messages to Jonah. Each one showed as delivered, but remained unanswered. 2 weeks had passed since their last real conversation, and the silence felt deafening. She set her phone down on her kitchen counter, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. The morning sunlight streamed through her window, warming her shoulders as she made her coffee. Her wheelchair was positioned perfectly by the counter. She'd gotten good at maneuvering in her small kitchen. But today, even these small victories felt hollow. Maybe I was fooling myself, she whispered to her empty apartment. The coffee maker gurgled in response. She'd seen them yesterday at the grocery store, Jonah pushing a cart with Maddie sitting inside it. Emily had waved, her heart leaping at the sight of them. Jonah had given her a quick nod, barely meeting her eyes, before steering his cart down another aisle. Maddie had looked confused, starting to wave back before they disappeared around the corner. That moment kept replaying in her mind. The way Jonah had avoided her gaze, how quickly he'd moved away. It reminded her too much of how others had treated her after the accident, like she was something to avoid, a reminder of how fragile life could be. Emily wheeled herself to her living room window, watching the neighborhood come to life. Mrs. Peterson walking her dog. The Martinez kids heading to school. Life moving forward while she felt stuck in place again. She picked up her phone one more time, typing out what she promised would be her last message. Jonah, I thought we had something special, not just romance, but understanding. If I've done something wrong, please tell me. If you've changed your mind about being friends with someone like me, I'd rather know." Her thumb hovered over the send button. The words, "someone like me," made her cringe, but they reflected her deepest fear, that Jonah had finally seen her limitations and decided they were too much. She pressed send. Hours passed. Emily tried to focus on work, on her physical therapy exercises, on anything but the silent phone. When evening came, she finally checked it again. The message showed as read, but there was no response. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily made a decision. She reached for her phone one last time, but instead of messaging Jonah, she called her mother. "Hi, Mom," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Remember how you've been asking me to visit? Is that offer still open?" Her mother's enthusiasm warmed her heart, even as it ached. They made plans for Emily to drive up to their house in Springfield for a few days. Maybe the change of scenery would help clear her head. As she packed her bag the next morning, Emily couldn't help but glance out her window toward the direction of Jonah's house. She'd learned which streets he took Maddie to school, which coffee shop he frequented, all the little details that had seemed so important just weeks ago. "I need this," she told herself firmly, zipping her suitcase. "I need to remember who I am without..." Without what? Without the hope of something more? Without the connection she'd thought they'd shared? She wheeled herself to her car, transferred herself into the driver's seat with practiced ease, and loaded her wheelchair into the back. As she pulled out of her driveway, she allowed herself one last look in her rearview mirror at the town that had started to feel like home again. Emily's car rolled to a stop in her parents' driveway, the familiar sight of their white colonial house bringing both comfort and a wave of emotions. Her father had installed a ramp last year, making visits easier, but it still felt strange coming home like this, feeling broken in more ways than one. Her mother, Sarah, rushed out to greet her, arms wide open. "Emmy, we've missed you so much!" She leaned down to hug Emily through the car window before stepping back to let her daughter manage the transfer to her wheelchair. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawn as Emily wheeled herself up the ramp. The scent of her mother's famous lasagna wafted through the air, and despite everything, Emily felt her spirits lift slightly. Inside, her childhood home looked exactly as she remembered. Family photos lining the walls, her mother's collection of ceramic birds on the windowsill, the comfortable worn-in furniture that held so many memories. "Your father's at the hardware store," Sarah explained, bustling around the kitchen. "He'll be back for dinner. Now tell me what's really brought you home, sweetheart. Your voice on the phone yesterday. I could tell something was wrong." Emily positioned her wheelchair at the kitchen table, watching her mother work. The familiar rhythm of her mother's movements in the kitchen provided a soothing backdrop as she struggled to find the right words. "I met someone," Emily finally said, her voice quiet. "A man named Jonah. He has a little girl named Maddie." She traced patterns on the wooden table with her finger. "They made me feel normal again. Special, even." Sarah paused in her cooking, turning to face her daughter. "And now? Now he won't talk to me. Won't even look at me." Emily's voice cracked. "I thought we had something real, Mom. Not just romance, but understanding. He saw me as Emily, not just the girl in the wheelchair. And Maddie?" She smiled despite her pain. "Maddie made me laugh again." Her mother pulled out a chair, sitting down beside her. "Tell me about them." So Emily did. She told her mother about the first meeting in the diner, about Maddie's innocent comment about her wheelchair being like a race car. She described Jonah's quiet strength, his tenderness with his daughter, the way he'd defended her against her ex-fiancé. As she spoke, she realized just how much they'd come to mean to her in such a short time. Sarah listened intently, reaching out to hold Emily's hand. When Emily finished, her mother was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Sometimes, sweetheart, when people pull away, it's not about us at all. It's about their own battles." "But how can I know that for sure?" Emily asked, wiping away a stray tear. "You can't," her mother said simply. "But if these people matter to you, and I can see they do, then maybe they're worth being patient for. Worth giving space to work through whatever they're facing." Emily thought about Jonah's face that day in the grocery store, not just the avoidance, but the exhaustion she'd glimpsed in his eyes. She thought about Maddie's confused wave, so different from her usual exuberant greetings. "You think something's wrong?" she asked her mother. "I think," Sarah said carefully, "that good people sometimes struggle to ask for help. And from what you've told me, Jonah sounds like a good person who's carrying a heavy load." Emily sat back in her wheelchair, letting her mother's words sink in. The hurt was still there, but it felt different now. Less personal, more like worry for someone she cared about. Maybe Jonah did need space, but that didn't mean she had to give up on their connection entirely. Emily sat in her parents' guest room, staring at her phone as it buzzed with an incoming call. Jonah's name flashed on the screen. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she hesitated, her mother's words echoing in her mind about patience and understanding. Taking a deep breath, she answered. "Hello?" "Emily." Jonah's voice sounded rough, tired. I need to talk to you." She waited, giving him space to find his words. Through the phone, she could hear him take a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," he continued. "I know I've been distant. I've been avoiding you, and you didn't deserve that. Not after everything." Emily gripped the phone tighter. "What's going on, Jonah? Please tell me." There was a long pause, filled with the weight of unspoken words. When Jonah finally spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "It's Maddie. She's sick. The doctors found something during her last checkup and—" He stopped, collecting himself. "She needs treatment, expensive treatment, and I don't know how I'm going to manage it all." Emily's heart ached for both of them. "Oh, Jonah." "I didn't want to burden you," he continued, his voice growing stronger. "You've been through so much already, and you're just starting to find your way again. I thought I should handle this on my own." "That's why you pulled away?" Emily asked softly. "Yeah." He sighed heavily. "I'm used to dealing with things alone. After Sarah died, I had to be strong for Maddie. But now, I realized I was wrong to shut you out. You've become important to us, to both of us. And instead of letting you in, I pushed you away." Emily wheeled herself to the window, looking out at the setting sun. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Jonah. It's okay to need help, to need support." "I know that now," he admitted. "When I saw Maddie asking about you today, wondering why you haven't been around, it hit me. I've been so focused on protecting everyone else that I ended up hurting the people I care about instead." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I want to be there for you both. You don't have to go through this alone." "You mean that?" The vulnerability in his voice made her heart clench. "Of course I do. You and Maddie. You helped me see myself differently. You made me feel whole again. Let me be there for you now." She heard him release a shaky breath. "I've missed you, Emily. These past few days, every time something happened, I wanted to call you, to hear your voice, but I kept telling myself I needed to handle it alone." "Well, you don't have to anymore," Emily said firmly. "I'm here, Jonah. Whatever you need." "Thank you," he whispered. After a moment, he cleared his throat. Would you want to meet somewhere? To talk properly?" "I'd like that." "How about the diner?" Jonah suggested. Where we first met, it feels right somehow. Emily smiled, remembering that first awkward encounter that had changed everything. The diner sounds perfect. The familiar bell above the diner door chimed as Emily wheeled herself inside. The evening crowd had thinned out, leaving only a few, regulars scattered among the booths. Her eyes found Jonah immediately. He sat at their usual corner table, his broad shoulders hunched over a cup of coffee. When he looked up and saw her, his face softened. He stood quickly, pulling out a chair to make space for her wheelchair. "You came," he said quietly. "Of course I did." Emily positioned herself at the table, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. "How's Maddie?" "She's with my sister tonight." Jonah wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "The doctors say she needs surgery, something with her heart. I barely understand half the medical terms they use." Sarah, the elderly waitress who knew them both, approached with a gentle smile. "Your usual, Emily?" Emily nodded, grateful for the familiar routine. As Sarah walked away, silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words. "I keep thinking about the first time we met," Jonah finally said, his voice rough. "You looked so uncertain, asking to share my table, but there was something in your eyes, this determination to keep going, even when everything felt impossible." Emily's throat tightened. "I remember feeling so exposed, so vulnerable, but you and Maddie, you didn't look at me with pity, you just saw me." "And you saw us, too," Jonah replied. "Not the tough biker, not the broken widower, just me and my daughter." Sarah returned with Emily's tea, leaving them alone again. Emily wrapped her fingers around the warm cup, gathering her thoughts. "When you stopped calling, stopped answering my messages," she began, "I thought maybe you'd decided I was too much trouble, that my problems were more than you wanted to deal with." Jonah's face crumpled. "God, Emily, no, never that. I just—" He ran a hand over his face. "After Sarah died, I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone else in. It was safer that way. For me, for Maddie. But then you came along, and suddenly I found myself caring again, wanting to be there for someone. And when I got Maddie's diagnosis—" "You got scared," Emily finished softly. "Terrified," he admitted. "I couldn't handle the thought of losing someone else I care about. So I did what I always do. I pulled away, tried to handle everything alone." Emily reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I understand fear, Jonah. Every day since my accident, I've been afraid. Afraid of being dependent, of being a burden, of never finding someone who could love me as I am now." Jonah turned his hand over, gripping hers. "You're not a burden, Emily. You're one of the strongest people I know." "And you don't have to be strong all the time," she replied. "It's okay to lean on someone else sometimes." His eyes met hers, vulnerable and honest. "I want to lean on you. I want to be there for you too. But I'm not good at this, at opening up, at letting people in." "Neither am I," Emily smiled. "Maybe we can figure it out together." Jonah squeezed her hand. "Together," he repeated, like a promise. "Whatever happens with Maddie's treatment, whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them as a team," Emily finished. They sat there in comfortable silence, their hands still joined across the table, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted between them. The fear wasn't gone. It might never be completely gone. But they no longer had to carry it alone. The elementary school buzzed with the familiar chaos of children's laughter and running feet. Emily wheeled herself alongside Jonah through the brightly decorated hallways, taking in the artwork pinned to bulletin boards and the sounds of learning drifting from classrooms. "Maddie loves it here," Jonah said, his voice soft with pride. "Even on her tough days, she never wants to miss school." They paused outside Maddie's classroom, where the children were engaged in an art project. Through the window, Emily spotted Maddie's dark curls bent over her work, her small face focused with determination. Despite everything she was going through, the little girl radiated joy as she created her masterpiece. "Look at her," Emily whispered. "She's so resilient." Jonah nodded, his eyes fixed on his daughter. "She gets that from her mother. Sarah always said that life was too short to let anything keep you down for long." Inside the classroom, Maddie looked up and spotted them. Her face lit up with a brilliant smile as she waved enthusiastically. Emily waved back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest at the simple gesture of acceptance. "Mrs. Thompson says she's one of the most helpful students in class," Jonah continued as they moved down the hallway. "Even when she's not feeling well, she's always trying to help other kids with their work." Emily smiled, thinking of how Maddie had helped her at their first meeting, breaking the ice with her innocent observation about the wheelchair. "She has a gift for making people feel comfortable." They reached the school's small garden, where several benches sat beneath flowering trees. Jonah settled onto one of them, at eye level with Emily in her chair. "You know, watching Maddie, she doesn't see limitations. She just sees possibilities." "I'm learning that from her," Emily admitted. "When I first met you both, I was so focused on what I couldn't do anymore. But Maddie..." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "She showed me that strength isn't about what your body can do. It's about how you face each day." Jonah's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You've always had that strength, Emily. Maybe you just needed someone to remind you it was there." A gentle breeze stirred the flowers around them, carrying the sweet scent of spring. Emily watched a group of children playing on the nearby playground, their laughter carrying across the schoolyard. "Thank you," Jonah said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. "For being here, for being part of our lives." Emily turned to him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. She thought about how far they'd both come since that first meeting in the diner, how much stronger they were together than apart. "You and Maddie," she said, feeling the truth of her words deep in her heart. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost, a sense of belonging." Jonah reached out and squeezed her hand gently. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play, both understanding that sometimes the strongest connections don't need words to be felt. As they prepared to leave, Emily took one last look at the school building, thinking of Maddie's bright smile and unwavering spirit. For the first time in years, she felt truly at peace with herself and her place in the world. The wheelchair that had once seemed like a barrier now felt like just another part of who she was, not a limitation, but simply a different way of moving through life. The morning sun cast long shadows through the hospital waiting room as Emily watched Jonah pace back and forth. His usual confident stride had been replaced by nervous energy, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The doctors had taken Maddie for more tests after she'd developed a high fever the night before. "You should sit down," Emily said softly. "You've been pacing for an hour." Jonah ran a hand through his disheveled hair but kept moving. "I can't. I need to be ready when the doctor comes out." Emily wheeled closer to him, reaching out to touch his arm as he passed. He flinched at the contact, and she felt the sting of his withdrawal. "When was the last time you ate something?" "I'm fine," he muttered, checking his phone for the 10th time in as many minutes. "Got to call work. Tell them I won't make it in again." "I can make those calls for you," Emily offered, trying to catch his eye. "Let me help, Jonah." He shook his head, already dialing. "I've got it handled." His voice was gruff, distant. Emily watched him walk away to make his call, her heart aching at the invisible wall building between them. She understood his fear. It radiated from him in waves. But his determination to handle everything alone was pushing her further away. The doctor finally emerged, and Jonah rushed to speak with her. Emily stayed back, giving them space, but she could see the tension in Jonah's shoulders as he listened to whatever news the doctor delivered. When he returned, his face was drawn. "They want to keep her for observation. The medication isn't working as well as they hoped." "I can stay," Emily said. "Help you keep an eye on her." "No." Jonah's response was quick, almost sharp. He softened his tone when he saw her expression. "I mean, you don't need to. I've got this covered." Emily felt the distance between them grow wider. Just weeks ago, they'd been sharing their deepest fears and hopes. Now, Jonah seemed to be retreating into himself, building walls that felt higher with each passing day. "You don't have to handle this alone," she tried again. "I care about Maddie, too." Jonah's eyes finally met hers, and she saw the storm of emotions there: fear, exhaustion, and something else that looked like guilt. "I know you do. But this is my responsibility. I'm her father. And I'm your—" Emily paused, unsure how to define what they were to each other now. "I'm here for you both." He nodded distractedly, already looking back toward Maddie's room. "I should get back in there. She might wake up soon." Emily watched him walk away, his shoulders hunched under the weight of his worry. She remembered their conversation in the school garden, how close they'd felt then. Now it seemed like that connection was slipping through her fingers like sand. But as she sat there, watching him through the window of Maddie's room, Emily made a decision. She wouldn't let him push her away, not this time. She'd learned too much about her own strength to give up now. If Jonah needed time to focus solely on Maddie, she would give him that time. If he needed space to process his fears, she would give him that space. But she wouldn't leave. She would stay right here, steady and present, until he was ready to let her in again. Emily watched as Jonah slumped into the chair beside her in the hospital corridor. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under his eyes, making him look older than his years. 3 days had passed since Maddie was admitted, and exhaustion lined every inch of his face. "The nurse is with her now," he said, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "Said I should take a break." Emily wheeled closer, offering him a cup of coffee from the nearby vending machine. "Here, you look like you need this." His fingers brushed against hers as he took the cup, and for a moment the wall between them seemed thinner. He stared into the dark liquid, his shoulders shaking slightly. "I can't lose her, Emily." The words came out barely above a whisper. "She's all I have left. After Sarah died—" He trailed off, taking a shaky breath. Emily reached out, placing her hand on his arm. This time he didn't pull away. "Talk to me, Jonah, please." His eyes, usually so guarded, met hers with raw vulnerability. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Sarah in that hospital bed. The doctors said the same things then. We're doing everything we can." But it wasn't enough. His voice cracked. "I couldn't save her. And now Maddie." "This isn't the same situation," Emily said gently. "Maddie is strong, just like her father. And unlike before, you're not alone in this." Jonah's hands trembled around the coffee cup. "I keep thinking about all the ways I could fail her. What if I can't afford the treatments? What if I make the wrong decisions? What if—" "Stop," Emily interrupted firmly. She took the cup from his shaking hands and set it aside. "You're not failing anyone. You're here, fighting for her every step of the way. That's what matters." "I'm terrified," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I've faced combat, dealt with things most people couldn't imagine. But this—" He gestured helplessly. "Watching her go through this, feeling so powerless, it's breaking me, Emily." Emily squeezed his hand. Being scared doesn't make you weak, Jonah. It makes you human. And you don't have to be strong all the time, not with me. His fingers tightened around hers. I've been pushing you away because I thought if I kept everyone at arm's length, it would hurt less if things went wrong. But it's just made everything harder. I know, Emily said softly. And I'm still here. Jonah looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. Why? Why would you stay after how I've treated you? Because I care about you both, she replied simply. And because sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let others help us carry our burdens. The tension in Jonah's shoulders began to ease. I've been so afraid of letting anyone in since Sarah died. But with you... He paused, gathering his thoughts. With you, I feel like maybe it's okay to need someone again, to want something more. Emily felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. It is okay. More than okay. I can't do this alone anymore, he admitted, his voice stronger now. I need you, Emily. Not just as a friend, but as... He squeezed her hand again, the gesture saying what words couldn't yet express. Emily smiled softly, understanding the unspoken meaning. Then I'll be here, whatever you need. We'll face this together. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Emily watched Maddie coloring at the kitchen table. The little girl's condition had improved significantly over the past few weeks, and color had returned to her cheeks. Jonah stood at the counter, preparing sandwiches for their afternoon together, his movements more relaxed than Emily had seen in months. Can I help? Emily asked, wheeling closer to the counter. Jonah smiled, passing her a loaf of bread. Sure, Maddie likes hers with the crusts cut off. They worked side by side, falling into an easy rhythm. Emily noticed how Jonah's hand would occasionally brush against her shoulder, casual touches that felt natural now. The tension that had gripped him during Maddie's hospital stay had eased, replaced by a quiet contentment. Daddy, look! Maddie held up her drawing, a bright splash of colors depicting 3 figures, one in a wheelchair. That's us at the park. Emily felt her heart warm at being included in Maddie's family picture. Jonah leaned down to examine the artwork, pride evident in his eyes. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Why don't you make another one while we finish getting ready? As Maddie returned to her coloring, Jonah turned to Emily. She's been drawing you in all her pictures lately, he said softly. You've become a big part of her life, of our lives. Emily felt tears prick at her eyes. You've both become important to me, too. They packed their lunch and headed to the nearby park, finding a spot under a large oak tree. Jonah spread out a blanket while Emily transferred herself from her wheelchair, something she now did with practiced ease. Maddie ran off to the playground within sight, her laughter carrying across the grass. It's good to see her energy coming back, Emily said, watching the little girl climb the jungle gym. Jonah nodded, settling down beside her. The doctors say she's responding well to the treatment. I didn't realize how much I was holding my breath until they gave us the good news. You've been carrying so much weight, Emily observed, reaching for his hand. But you're learning to share it now. He interlaced their fingers, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Having you here, it's changed everything. I forgot what it felt like to have someone to lean on. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Maddie play. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and a gentle wind carried the scent of autumn leaves. I used to think I didn't deserve happiness anymore, Jonah admitted quietly. After Sarah, after everything with the gang, I thought my job was just to keep Maddie safe, and that was it. Emily squeezed his hand. And now? Now? He turned to look at her, his eyes soft. Now I'm starting to believe in second chances. In hope. He paused, watching as Maddie waved at them from the swings. "You showed me that it's okay to want more, to dream about the future again." "I know what you mean," Emily said. "Before I met you, I felt so alone, like my wheelchair defined everything about me. But you and Maddie, you see me for who I am." Jonah shifted closer, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. "You're the strongest person I know, Emily. You've taught me more about courage than any battle ever did." They sat together, sharing the simple peace of the moment. The world around them continued its gentle rhythm. Leaves dancing in the breeze, children laughing on the playground, and the warm afternoon sun painting everything in golden light. The kitchen filled with warmth as the oven preheated, and the scent of vanilla wafted through the air. Emily sat at the kitchen counter, measuring flour into a large mixing bowl, while Maddie stood on a step stool beside her, eagerly waiting to help. "Remember what I said about the flour?" Emily asked, smiling at the little girl's enthusiasm. Maddie nodded solemnly. "Pour it slow, or it goes everywhere like snow." Jonah leaned against the counter, watching them with amusement. "Speaking from experience there, Emily." "Maybe once or twice," Emily admitted, laughing. She handed Maddie the measuring cup, guiding her small hands as they poured the flour together. "Perfect. Now for the sugar." The kitchen counter was organized chaos, measuring cups scattered about, a dusting of flour on various surfaces, and 3 hearts full of joy. Emily had suggested baking cookies when Maddie mentioned never having made them from scratch before. "Can I crack the egg?" Maddie asked, bouncing on her toes. "How about we do it together?" Jonah moved behind his daughter, his large hands engulfing her tiny ones as they cracked the egg against the bowl's edge. A few pieces of shell fell in, and Emily expertly fished them out with a spoon. "You're good at this," Jonah observed, reaching for another egg. Emily shrugged, but her eyes sparkled. "My mom and I used to bake every Sunday. It was our thing." As they mixed the ingredients, Maddie insisted on counting each stir. 1, 2, 3. She got to 20 before losing track and starting over, making Emily and Jonah exchange amused glances. The dough came together smoothly, and soon they were rolling small balls and placing them on cookie sheets. Maddie's were slightly lopsided, but she beamed with pride at each one. "Now for the best part," Emily announced, pulling out colorful sprinkles. Maddie's eyes widened with delight. "Really?" she asked, looking to her father for permission. Jonah nodded. "Go for it, sweetheart. Just try to get more on the cookies than on the floor." The kitchen filled with giggles as Maddie decorated each cookie with careful concentration, her tongue sticking out slightly. Emily helped her with the harder-to-reach cookies, while Jonah watched them both, a warm feeling spreading through his chest. When the first batch went into the oven, Maddie pressed her face against the oven door's window. "How long do we have to wait?" 12 minutes, Emily said, setting the timer. "Want to help clean up while we wait?" To Jonah's surprise, Maddie nodded eagerly. Emily had a way of making even chores seem fun, turning them into games that had his daughter laughing as she helped wipe down the counter. The timer dinged, and Jonah carefully removed the golden brown cookies from the oven. The kitchen filled with the irresistible aroma of fresh-baked cookies, and Maddie could hardly contain her excitement. "Remember, they need to cool first," Emily reminded her gently. While they waited, Jonah prepared glasses of milk, and Emily arranged the cookies on a plate. Finally, they settled around the kitchen table, ready to taste their creation. Maddie took a big bite of her cookie, leaving crumbs on her chin. "They're perfect," she declared, reaching for another one. Emily nibbled her cookie more slowly, savoring the moment. Jonah watched as she helped Maddie wipe cookie crumbs from her face, the gesture so natural and caring. The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the scene, and Jonah felt his heart swell with contentment. "These really are good," he said, reaching for another cookie. But what made him happiest wasn't the taste of the cookies. It was watching Emily and Maddie together, seeing how naturally they fit into each other's lives, into his life. The evening sun cast long shadows through the living room windows as Emily and Jonah sat on his worn leather couch. Maddie had fallen asleep upstairs after their afternoon of baking, leaving them in a comfortable silence. Emily's wheelchair sat empty beside the couch, and she settled comfortably against the cushions. "I've been thinking," Jonah said, his voice soft but serious. He turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the warmth of the setting sun. "About us, about the future." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Me too," she admitted, fidgeting with the edge of a throw pillow. "These past few months—" Jonah paused, searching for the right words. "Seeing you with Maddie today, it just felt right. Like this is how it's supposed to be." Emily smiled, remembering the joy on Maddie's face as they baked together. "She's an amazing little girl, Jonah, and you're an incredible father." "I've been looking at bigger houses," he said, his words careful and measured. "Something with wider doorways, maybe a ramp at the entrance, something that would work for all of us." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "All of us?" "I know it's a big step," Jonah continued, reaching for her hand. "But I can't imagine our lives without you anymore. Maddie adores you, and He squeezed her hand gently. "I want to build a life with you, Emily." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I want that too," she whispered. "But are you sure? My condition, it won't get better. There will always be challenges." "We've both faced our share of challenges," Jonah said firmly, "and we're stronger together. I don't want perfect. I want real. I want you." They spent the next hour talking about practical matters, how to modify a house to make it accessible, how to help Maddie adjust to the changes, how to blend their lives together seamlessly. But beneath the practical discussion lay a current of excitement and hope. "We could convert the master bathroom," Jonah suggested, sketching rough plans on a notepad. "Make it fully accessible for you." Emily leaned against his shoulder, looking at his drawings. "And maybe a garden in the backyard? Something Maddie and I could work on together?" "She'd love that," Jonah smiled, wrapping an arm around Emily's shoulders. "She's already talking about growing strawberries." The conversation flowed naturally between them as they shared their hopes and dreams. They talked about family dinners, holiday traditions they wanted to start, and the little moments they looked forward to sharing. "It won't always be easy," Emily acknowledged, her voice soft but determined. "There will be hard days." "And we'll face them together," Jonah assured her, his voice steady and sure. "Just like we have been." The room grew darker as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, but neither made a move to turn on the lights. They sat together in the growing dusk, their hearts full of plans and possibilities. Emily rested her head against Jonah's chest, listening to his steady heartbeat, while his fingers traced gentle patterns on her arm. In this quiet moment, they both knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. The challenges that lay ahead didn't seem so daunting anymore. Not when they would face them side by side. They had found something rare and precious in each other, a love that didn't try to fix or change, but accepted and supported unconditionally. The hospital waiting room felt smaller than usual as Jonah paced back and forth, his heavy boots marking each step with a dull thud. Emily sat quietly in her wheelchair, watching him wear a path in the worn linoleum floor. They had rushed Maddie to the emergency room after she developed a high fever and severe pain. She was fine yesterday, Jonah muttered, running his fingers through his beard. We were playing board games and she was laughing. His voice cracked slightly at the end. Emily wheeled closer to him, reaching out to catch his hand as he passed. Hey, she said softly. Come sit with me. Jonah hesitated for a moment before dropping into the chair beside her. His large frame seemed to fold in on itself, shoulders hunched under the weight of his worry. Emily kept hold of his hand, her thumb moving in small, comforting circles across his skin. The doctors know what they're doing, she reminded him gently. They've been monitoring her condition carefully. I can't lose her, Emily. His voice was barely above a whisper. She's all I had left after Sarah died. I can't. You're not going to lose her, Emily interrupted firmly. And you're not alone anymore. I'm right here. A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Mr. Kincaid, we need to discuss Maddie's treatment options. Jonah started to rise, but his legs seemed unsteady. Emily squeezed his hand. Would you like me to come with you? He nodded, grateful for her presence. Emily navigated her wheelchair alongside him as they followed the nurse to a consultation room. The doctor explained that Maddie needed an emergency procedure to address complications from her condition. The risks were significant, but necessary. As the doctor spoke, Emily felt Jonah's grip on her hand tighten. She could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear she'd seen in her parents' eyes after her accident. But she also saw his strength, buried beneath the worry. How soon can you do the procedure? Jonah asked, his voice rough with emotion. We can prep her right away, the doctor replied. The sooner we address this, the better her chances. While they waited during Maddie's procedure, Emily stayed by Jonah's side. She shared stories about her own time in the hospital, how she'd learned to find hope in the darkest moments. Jonah listened, drawing comfort from her words and her unwavering presence. Hours passed like molasses. Jonah alternated between sitting silently and pacing nervously. Emily remained steady, an anchor in his storm of anxiety. When he needed to talk, she listened. When he needed quiet, she simply held his hand. Finally, the doctor returned with news that made Jonah's knees weak with relief. The procedure had been successful. Maddie was stable and responding well to treatment. She's asking for you, the doctor said with a smile. In Maddie's recovery room, they found her small form surrounded by monitoring equipment, but her eyes were bright and alert. Daddy, she called out weakly, reaching for him. Jonah moved to her bedside in 2 long strides, carefully gathering her tiny hand in his. Hey, princess, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You scared me. I'm okay, Daddy, Maddie assured him, then looked past him to Emily. You stayed too? Emily wheeled closer to the bed. Of course I did, sweetie. We're family. Jonah looked between his daughter and Emily, overwhelmed by the love he felt for both of them. The fear that had gripped him for hours finally began to loosen its hold. He wasn't alone anymore. He had Emily's strength to lean on, her love to guide him through the dark times. The late afternoon sun painted golden streaks across the diner's worn linoleum floor. Emily sat at their usual corner booth, the same one where she'd first met Jonah all those months ago. She watched him fidget with his coffee cup, something clearly on his mind. Maddie was spending the afternoon with her grandparents, which was unusual for a Tuesday. Everything okay? Emily asked, reaching across the table to still his restless hands. You seem nervous. Jonah's eyes met hers, and beneath his tough exterior, she could see vulnerability swimming in their depths. He cleared his throat, his fingers intertwining with hers. You know, I used to come here every morning, he began, his voice rougher than usual. Just me and Maddie, trying to figure out how to keep going after Sarah died. I thought that was going to be my life. Just existing, getting through each day for Maddie's sake. Emily listened quietly, sensing there was more he needed to say. The afternoon crowd had thinned out, leaving them in a peaceful bubble of semi-privacy. The gentle clink of dishes and soft murmur of distant conversations created a familiar backdrop to their moment. "Then you rolled in here," Jonah continued, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Looking lost and scared, but with this fire in your eyes that said you weren't giving up. You asked to share my table, and everything changed." Emily felt her heart flutter as she remembered that day. "I was terrified you'd say no," she admitted softly. "I almost did," he confessed. "But something told me to take a chance. Best decision I ever made." He squeezed her hand gently. "You showed me that being strong doesn't mean being alone. You taught me that it's okay to need someone, to let someone in." Jonah pushed his coffee cup aside and reached into his jacket pocket. Emily's breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. Her eyes widened as he moved from his side of the booth to kneel beside her wheelchair. "Emily," his voice was thick with emotion, "you walked into my life when I thought I was done with love. You showed me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up every day, even when things get tough." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. Neither can Maddie." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she looked at the man before her, this tough, tattooed biker who had become her everything. The man who had seen past her wheelchair to the woman inside, who had helped her find her strength again. "I know we've both been through hell," Jonah continued, his own eyes glistening. "We both know what it's like to lose everything and have to rebuild. But I don't want to just exist anymore. I want to live, really live, with you by my side." He took a deep breath. "Emily Dawson, will you marry me?" Emily's vision blurred with tears as she looked at the ring, then back at Jonah's face. She saw all their shared moments reflected in his eyes, the laughter, the tears, the quiet understanding. She saw Maddie's smiling face and the promise of countless family dinners, movie nights, and precious moments yet to come. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jonah's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He stood and wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as she buried her face in his chest. In that moment, surrounded by his warmth and love, Emily knew that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a simple question about sharing a table. The morning sun filtered through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the small chapel's wooden pews. Emily sat in the bridal room, her white dress carefully arranged around her wheelchair. Her mother fussed with the veil, tears glistening in her eyes. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother whispered, adjusting a loose curl. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her dress. The simple, elegant gown had been specially designed to complement her seated position, with delicate lace details that made her feel like a princess. Her heart fluttered with anticipation, knowing that soon she would be Mrs. Kincaid. A soft knock at the door revealed Maddie, practically bouncing with excitement in her powder blue flower girl dress. Her face lit up when she saw Emily. "You look like an angel," Maddie exclaimed, rushing over to hug her soon-to-be stepmother. "Daddy's so nervous. He keeps checking his tie over and over." Emily laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Is he really?" "Uh-huh. Uncle Mike had to make him sit down before he wore a hole in the floor." The thought of her tough biker being nervous made Emily's heart swell with affection. She took Maddie's small hand in hers, squeezing it gently. Are you ready to be the best flower girl ever? Maddie nodded solemnly, clutching her basket of rose petals. I practiced all week in the backyard. The wedding coordinator appeared at the door, signaling it was time. Emily's father wheeled her to the chapel entrance, where they waited for the music to begin. As the first notes of the processional filled the air, Maddie started down the aisle, scattering petals with careful precision. Emily's father leaned down and whispered, "Ready, princess?" She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. As they entered the chapel, Emily's eyes immediately found Jonah. He stood at the altar, looking handsome in his black suit, his usually wild hair neatly combed. The moment their eyes met, his nervous expression melted into one of pure love and wonder. Tears pricked at Emily's eyes as her father guided her wheelchair down the aisle. The faces of their loved ones blurred together. All she could see was Jonah, waiting for her with that tender smile that had first captured her heart. At the altar, Jonah knelt down to be at eye level with Emily, taking her hands in his. His fingers trembled slightly against hers, and she squeezed them reassuringly. Maddie stood nearby, beaming with pride as she watched her father and Emily exchange vows. I promise to love you through all of life's challenges. Jonah's voice was thick with emotion. To be your strength when you need it, and to let you be mine when I falter. Emily's voice shook as she responded. I promise to love you completely, to face whatever comes our way together, and to always remember that our love is stronger than any obstacle. As they exchanged rings, Maddie stepped forward with the rings on a small pillow, her face glowing with joy. The simple bands represented not just their love for each other, but the family they had built together. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister announced. You may kiss the bride. Jonah leaned down, cupping Emily's face gently in his hands as he kissed her. The chapel erupted in applause and cheers, with Maddie clapping the loudest of all. At the reception, Jonah carefully lifted Emily from her wheelchair for their first dance. She wrapped her arms around his neck as they swayed to the music, lost in their own world. His strong arms held her securely, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. I love you, Mrs. Kincaid, he murmured into her hair. Emily smiled, feeling complete in his embrace. I love you too, Mr. Kincaid. The morning light streamed through the kitchen windows of their new home, casting a warm glow over the breakfast table. Emily stirred pancake batter while Maddie carefully arranged chocolate chips into smiley faces on the cooking ones. Jonah stood at the stove, expertly flipping each pancake with a gentle twist of his wrist. Dad, Emily, look at this one. Maddie held up a plate with a pancake decorated to look like a cat. It's perfect. Emily wheeled closer to inspect the creation. That's amazing, sweetie. You're getting really good at this. Jonah glanced over his shoulder, a soft smile playing on his lips. Pretty soon you'll be better at making pancakes than your old man. Never, Maddie giggled, hugging her father's waist. Nobody makes better pancakes than you, Dad. The kitchen was filled with the warm scent of breakfast and the sound of their laughter. Emily watched as Jonah picked Maddie up and spun her around, careful to avoid the hot stove. Her heart swelled with love for her new family. Later that morning, they tackled the task of unpacking the last few boxes in their new house. Emily organized the books on the living room shelves, while Jonah assembled Maddie's new desk for her homework corner. The little girl bounced between, helping them both, eager to be involved in every aspect of setting up their home. Emily, can we put my science fair trophy next to your college diploma? Maddie asked, holding up the small plastic award. Of course we can, honey. That's a perfect spot for it. Jonah paused his work with the desk to watch them arrange the shelf together. The sight of his daughter and wife working side by side made his chest tight with emotion. Emily caught his eye and smiled, understanding the depth of feeling in his gaze. As the afternoon wore on, they took a break to enjoy lunch in their backyard. The spring air was mild, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from the garden they'd started together. Maddie chased butterflies while Emily and Jonah sat at the patio table, their hands intertwined. "I never thought I'd have this," Emily admitted softly, watching Maddie play. "After the accident, I was so sure I'd never—" Jonah squeezed her hand. "You deserve every bit of happiness, Em. We both do." "Even when Maddie's treatment bills come in?" She worried her bottom lip. "The insurance doesn't cover everything." "Hey," Jonah turned to face her fully. "We're in this together. Whatever comes our way, we'll handle it as a family. That's what matters." Emily nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. They'd already faced so much together: the struggles with Maddie's health, the adjustments to their new life, the occasional disapproving looks from strangers who didn't understand their family. But through it all, their love had only grown stronger. As evening approached, they settled into their new routine. Maddie worked on her homework at her freshly assembled desk, while Emily helped explain math problems. Jonah prepared dinner in the kitchen, the sound of chopping vegetables and sizzling pans creating a comforting backdrop to their domestic scene. The family gathered around the dinner table, sharing stories about their day. Maddie excitedly talked about her upcoming school play, while Emily discussed her plans for starting an online support group for other wheelchair users. Jonah listened to them both with pride, occasionally adding his own thoughts and gentle teasing. After dinner, they curled up together on the oversized couch, Maddie nestled between them as they watched her favorite movie. The soft glow from the TV illuminated their content faces, and Emily caught Jonah's eye over their daughter's head. His smile reflected the peace in her heart. They were home. They were together. And they were happy. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across their backyard. Jonah sat on the porch swing beside Emily's wheelchair, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. Maddie lay sprawled on a blanket nearby, drawing pictures in her sketchbook with intense concentration. Jonah watched the peaceful scene before him, his heart full. The gentle creaking of the porch swing and the soft scratching of Maddie's colored pencils created a soothing melody that matched the tranquil evening. He thought back to that first meeting at the diner, how different things had been then. He'd been so closed off, wrapped in his grief and fear, barely holding it together for Maddie's sake. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked softly, noticing his contemplative expression. "Just remembering the day we met," he replied, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "How nervous you looked when you asked to share my table." Emily chuckled. "I was terrified. Here was this big, tough-looking biker guy, and I was about to invade his space." "And now look at us," Jonah said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to approach me that day." Maddie looked up from her drawing. "Then we wouldn't be a family," she said matter-of-factly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Emily reached out and touched Maddie's hair affectionately. "You're right, sweetie, and I can't imagine not having you two in my life." The last rays of sunlight caught the silver charm bracelet on Emily's wrist, a gift from Jonah and Maddie for their first Christmas together. Each charm represented a milestone in their journey: a tiny wheelchair for their first meeting, a picnic basket for their early dates, a heart for their wedding day. "You know what I'm most grateful for?" Jonah said, watching the charms sparkle. That you both taught me it's okay to need help sometimes. That being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone." Emily nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She remembered how he'd struggled during Maddie's health crisis, trying to shoulder everything by himself until he finally learned to lean on her support. "Look," Maddie exclaimed, holding up her drawing. It showed 3 figures holding hands, one tall and broad, one in a wheelchair, and one small figure between them. Above the picture, she'd written in careful letters, "My family." Jonah felt his eyes grow misty as he took in the simple but powerful image. Emily squeezed his hand, sharing in the emotion of the moment. "Can we go for a walk before it gets dark?" Maddie asked, already gathering her art supplies. "Of course," Emily replied, her eyes twinkling. "Race you to the sidewalk." Maddie giggled and ran ahead, while Jonah helped Emily navigate her wheelchair down the ramp they'd built together. At the bottom, Maddie was waiting patiently, reaching for both their hands. They moved together down the familiar path, Maddie skipping between them, their shadows stretching long in the fading light. The evening air was sweet with the scent of blooming jasmine, and somewhere in the distance, a wind chime tinkled softly. Jonah looked at his wife and daughter, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. Everything that had happened, the loss, the pain, the struggles, had led them here, to this perfect moment. They were more than just 3 people who had found each other. They were a family, bound together by love, understanding, and unwavering support. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.